Hi folks, yes, I have a new backdrop which I am actually really fond of, and I'm really sorry about this glare over here. It's really not, it almost makes it seem fish scaly. It's a lovely, I love this backdrop. I will ultimately do something about the glare. The old backdrop was a paper backdrop, and I have a cat, and he had a lot of fun with that backdrop. So it's time to replace it with something sturdier. That will be shown a little bit more respect, and I will figure out what to do with this particular glare issue that I'm facing. It's actually just cloth, so irrespective. Sorry about that. Let's keep going. I also just came out of the shower, and it is over 90 degrees in Los Angeles, and anyone who lives in this kind of climate and weather knows that this is what you look like after you come out of the shower and it's over 90 degrees outside. So I apologize for my appearance as well. The third thing to really express my gratitude for is the fact that you guys stick with me even though I do my new moon videos after the new moon. In this case, it's significantly after. So I had a busy day yesterday, the new moon happened, I had every intention of doing the video, and this is the risk of danger of doing a new moon video after the new moon, is that you may not get to it right after a new moon. So I really thank you for your patience. Personally, I'm not saying this to be defensive. I don't think you've missed anything. Other than the fact that now that we are about 4 hours after the new moon, hopefully you'll start to feel a little bit more energy and resurgence of willpower and drive, which happens after every new moon. 48 to 72 hours, especially 48 hours, 24 hours before a new moon, things are flatter, there's fatigue, there's a kind of depression, there's a lowness, and then the new moon happens and we start to move forward. The new moon was in the sign of Cancer, and the new moons right now are in the last few degrees of every sign, which means that the energy of a sign is no longer just confined right now to what one would call the sign season. So we often hear about Cancer season and Leo season and Sagittarius season, when the sun every year goes through the same sign of the zodiac at the same time. That time period is colloquially referred to as Cancer season. The sun is still in the sign of Cancer and has been in the sign of Cancer for almost a month. By the end of this week, it will enter Leo and start Leo season. But when you have the sun going through the sign of Cancer and almost make it to the end and a new moon happens then, that new moon initiates another 4-week period, another month being derived from the word moon, another lunar month, where the energy is related to that part of the chart where the sign sits and that sign remain active. So right now, while Cancer season may officially be over by the end of this week, in a certain sense, the Cancer lunar month and the energies and activities related to this part of the chart where Cancer sits in your chart. Which house does the sign of Cancer occupy? What does that house stand for? Who does it stand for? In some ways, energies and activities related to that part of the chart become more active now over the next 4 weeks. And remember, after new moon, we're going to head to a 2-week period where we're going to have a full moon. The full moon will be in Aquarius, and then 2 weeks later, we're going to have the next new moon in the sign of Leo. So even though Leo season starts around the 21st, 22nd, 23rd of July, as it does every year, we're not going to have the new moon in Leo till, what is it now? Till the middle of August. And then Leo period is going to continue on. In a certain sense, the Leo energies will become activated and stay active till the middle of September. Which is fine, because by the middle of September, Venus, which is going to go retrograde in Leo in a few days' time, is going to be direct. And I personally, wherever Leo sits in your chart, don't mind that for all of us. But right now, the energies of a certain part of the chart are being worked out. The planet Mars is also traveling relatively close to the Sun. So we have Mars, Venus, Mercury, the Sun, the new moon occurring in a kind of succession within the same sign. So we had Mars go through the sign of Cancer. You can look up these dates online if you really want to have a sense of how these events have been building. You have Venus going through the sign of Cancer. You've had Mercury going through the sign of Cancer. Mars is now in Virgo. Mercury and Venus are now in Leo. And the Sun, of course, is going to enter Leo shortly. And so all these planets have done their work. Mars putting a certain amount of energy into goal pursuit and the protection of boundaries in the sign of Cancer when it made its transit. Venus bringing a certain amount of sweetness, but also opportunity. Mercury bringing a certain amount of communication. The sun bringing its annual solar review, internal review of this part of the chart. And then we have the new moon. And when the new moon occurs in this manner, all this preparation now can lead to some action that will help you. And indeed, with the astrology related to this, a very energetic new moon. This is the new moon that everyone is talking about. The astrology suggests that action is needed. Let's break down all the different transits that are in question with this new moon, because it is, even in my past few videos, I've referred to this new moon. This new moon is when stuff starts to happen, but it's a very peculiar stuff starting to happen, because on the 23rd, in 5 days' time, Venus goes retrograde till September the 3rd. Sometime close to the middle of August, Mercury goes retrograde. So when Mercury and Venus are both retrograde, there is a suggestion that it's time for a certain kind of review coming up. Now, it is important to touch on Venus retrograde as part of this video because, well, how shall I put it? There has been a certain amount of forward... The new moon itself opposes Pluto and squares the nodes. One of the transits that is very active at this time and has been for a while is that the nodes of the moon, which are in the process of entering and actually some have entered Aries and Libra at this point in time, squaring Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto has just retrograded into Capricorn. It's going to go direct. It's going to be out of Capricorn by the beginning of next year, but it's going to be back in Capricorn for a couple of months in the latter half of next year, finishing up its transit in Capricorn. I have done another video on this, and I would strongly suggest looking at that. I'll place a link to it at the end of this, because remember, in a sentence, the purpose of that video was to encourage you to look at the Pluto transit through Capricorn this year and for a couple of months next year as being probably the most important transit in our charts right now, because whatever changes, massive changes, ideally constructive changes, whether you are able to see them as constructive or not, that Pluto is making need to be aided and assisted so that the right kind of changes can occur, and Pluto doesn't decide to force a change by sometimes doing things like creating a health crisis if it's transiting the 6th house, or creating a massive relationship or legal crisis if it's transiting the 7th house, or especially if Pluto has been, or a residence crisis, or separating you from your homeland if it is moving through the 4th house. If you're resisting the change that Pluto has been trying to make since 2008, then this new moon, which opposes the sign of Pluto, is really encouraging you. When a new moon happens in this way, there can be a tendency, and it opposes Pluto, there's a need to integrate both the energies in an opposition. There's a need to stand in the middle of this seesaw with Pluto on one side and the new moon on one side and find the right balance. Both need to be honored. The new moon is a faster moving energy, so certain amount of action needs to be taken in the sign of Cancer and the chart. And indeed, the astrology suggests that a lot of our development is dependent on these actions being taken. So where does Cancer sit in your chart? What do you need to think about? What do you need to plan? There's a real importance to look at your values, what you value, who you are authentically internally, with Venus going retrograde till September the 4th, because you will be having to review your relationships and your finances and your resources with what you value and who you value and how you value yourself. Because everything, of course, is somehow dependent on this particular issue. Sorry, my computer is making some changes that it has decided to make. And it's beeping at me, and I don't want it to keep beeping at us. So the new moon in Cancer is going to require a certain amount of activity wherever Cancer sits. At the same time, do not forget about the importance of completing these Plutonian changes. And indeed, over the next 4 weeks, they may make their presence felt, and you may need to find an effective way of juggling. Goodness! Excuse me. This is what happens when you install software that's supposed to take care of your computer. I apologize. so somewhere, so I'm gonna just close my laptop. So somewhere, while you focus on the Cancer part of your chart, and you need to, because it's like if you look at your chart as a wheel, the whole wheel is dependent on you moving this part of the chart. And I'll talk about moving in what way in a second. But you will have to contend with the Pluto transit and the Capricorn part of your chart, making its presence felt and asserting itself and requiring that those changes that it is encouraging you to make that are for your highest good and that it has been making ruthlessly in a Plutonian way since 2008 are also made and carried through. You cannot assume, you will not be able to just put your weight behind the Cancer side of the chart and the tasks that need to be taken care of there. So if you are, for example, a Libra rising and you have the new moon occurring in your 10th house of career and Pluto making its transit in the 4th house of home and family and land and real estate and homeland and mother, you are going to have to find a way to balance both these responsibilities. But there's a need to articulate, decide, and start to plant seed and take actions on the career side of the chart. Some people say with a new moon that it's by the corresponding full moon in the sign of Cancer about 6 months from now that things will come to fruition. So if you're Libra rising and you have a tendency to see seeds starting to be planted and a decision being implanted around the new moon in Cancer every year that reaches its kind of fruition sometime in December or January from a career perspective, then trust that timing, and action does need to be taken. You do not need to become hysterical or maniacal about it. You can just commit to doing it. But somewhere you've also got to pay attention to and integrate this Pluto transit through your 4th house and the pressure that it is putting for changes to be made in the part of the chart that has to do with home and land and real estate and mother and homeland and etc. Okay, so you get the picture. There's a need for that integration, and it is important. One could even argue that they will be dependent on each other because they're going to tug at you. Pluto is the stronger planet, so it will win. But you don't want it to be a battle. You have to take action in the Cancer part of your chart. If there's one thing I have to leave you with this, that's true of every new moon. You get to respond to things that the new moon brings in that part of your chart. But with this particular new moon, action is necessary. We've had a conversation before about what transits we feel are beneficial and what transits we feel are problematic. And this is a perfect example of a new moon making oppositions and squares, problematic transits. But you will find that actions taken now over the next 4 months could be enormously constructive and decisive in starting to usher in the changes that the second half of this year are trying to make. Squares can sometimes inspire, by virtue of the tension they bring, greater action and activity than trines, which are a harmonious transit, can bring, because a trine can happen and pass by you, and because there's a certain amount of harmony, people often don't take advantages of trines. And it's not like trines are not happening right now. I will come to that in a second. But the bottom line is, new moon opposing Pluto, squaring the nodes, again, in order for Pluto's transit to be completed properly and constructively, a certain amount of energy has to be put into the nodes and the eclipses. The next eclipse that counts for this is in the sign of Taurus on October 28th, with August 28th, the week before and week after, playing an important role in that process. The nodes are faster moving than Pluto. Action needs to be taken to lean into the North Node in Taurus and Aries. Just because the North Node has moved into Aries, I think today, doesn't mean that all of a sudden Taurus is not important. For the rest of this year, till at least October 28th, the Taurus eclipses in the North Node transit are extremely important. And indeed, this Aries, we don't have to, all of a sudden on the internet, there's all this stuff about the North Node has moved into Aries and this will happen and that will happen. It's been happening since April, my friends. We had an eclipse, a solar eclipse in April. These are gradual things, okay? All this kind of astrological terrorizing around things happening on a certain... The new moon happened in Cancer yesterday. I'm doing this video 24 hours later, more than 24 hours later practically. Has anything happened in the last 24 hours necessarily that is, falling to pieces, considering it's a new moon that's opposite Pluto and squaring the nodes? This is the kind of hysteria that these videos tend to produce, that so many people tend to produce on social media platforms that it can, sudden things do happen, but come on, these things are more gradual, and it's important to pay attention to the astrology of the time, because transits are approaching and then separating, and there's a time period for it. Now, that does not mean that you should not pay attention to this new moon in Cancer and figure out where Cancer sits in your chart and what house it occupies and what steps you need to take in order to move your chart and your life forward in the directions where it needs to, in a way that it supports the closing Pluto transit in Capricorn and supports the North Node in Taurus and Aries, and supports the upcoming eclipse on October the 28th, and supports the North Node axis now in the North Node in Aries and the South Node in Libra. Indeed, you may find that, as I've said to you, when we're in a North Node eclipse cycle, like we are right now, North Node solar eclipse in Aries on April 19th, corresponding North Node lunar eclipse on October 28th in Taurus, you may find that it is the South Node activation and activities that are prompting North Node activities. Anyway, it's a partnership between the two. You've got to release where the South Node is, lean into where the North Node is. And whatever these transits are, the fact that we have a solar eclipse in Libra 2 weeks before the North Node eclipse in Taurus on October 28th means that this conversation continues. Wherever we're supposed to pour our energy into to manifest something by October 28th in the Taurus part of our chart may well lead to the fact that a corresponding release needs to occur in the Libra part of our chart between the middle of October and into March, April of next year. Okay, there's a lot of information in this video, I'm realizing. Okay, so the new moon happens with with so much is dependent on the new moon and the activities that need to be taken in the Cancer part of the chart. Now that all these transits have happened, Mars, Venus, Mercury, the Sun almost done, what needs to be done in the Cancer part of your chart to move your life forward? There is a trine. This new moon does trine Neptune in Pisces. Neptune, we've talked about this, planet of gaslighting, planet of deceit, in the ways that it really affects us most. If there's something artistic or highly spiritual in a favorable way, inspirational, muses, connected to the Cancer part of your chart and the Pisces part of your chart, great. It could be a new moon of enormous creativity and enormous spirituality. Spirituality associated with Pisces of an isolated kind, if we're really kind of listening to the music of the spheres. So you're listening to the music of the spheres either to be inspired in your creative work or to be inspired spiritually. Could involve a kind of a renunciatory quality, a kind of giving up of your routine and retiring to realize something, reflect on something, meditate on something, reflect on karmic consequences. The Neptune is in Pisces right now. But at the same time, there is with Neptune in the sign of Pisces since 2015, 2016 especially, a certain amount of loss associated with that part of the chart, and some of this loss may be being brought about by cloudy or deceptive behavior. Well, this new moon allows you to take some steps to address that. It could simply be to try and gain some clarity on where the cloudiness or it isn't. The fact that there's cloudiness can sometimes mean that we may be suspecting something more extreme than is actually occurring. With Neptune, our ability to think clearly is compromised. And so this new moon does give you the power to... This is why decisiveness related to the Cancer part of your chart, determining what needs to be taken in a way that it aligns with how you value yourself and your values, is so important to this new moon, because it will allow you to take some steps and actions to move your chart forward in a way that frees up the nodes, and especially the North Node in Taurus and Aries to do its work, and Pluto in Capricorn to finish its transit. If you take the most self-loving, which also involves a certain amount of discipline, if discipline is probably the highest form of self-love, as they say, whatever tasks need to be taken in the sign of Cancer, with Venus going retrograde shortly after and arguably stationary right now, you've got to think in terms of what you value and what changes need to be made in order to move your chart forward and grapple with some of the gaslighty energy in the Capricorn part of the chart. Two other transits that are worth talking about. Venus trines the North Node at close to the time, it's going to happen in the next 10 days or so. Opportunities coming in that may propel you to make and act on these changes as well. Okay? And number two, Mars opposing Saturn. This cannot be ignored. Be very careful about what actions you take. Mars in Virgo, Saturn in Pisces. In order to defend, there's a need for measured, careful action that is not rash. As rational as possible, as meticulous as possible at this time. Mars in Virgo may require you to meticulously look at certain details. Remember, Pisces is the part of the chart where Neptune is transiting. Saturn is also here. It's time for consequence and acting responsibly, acting with a sense of self-love. Mars can inspire the pursuit of goals and boundary setting and conflict. But opposing Saturn, you've really got to, and this transit ends in the next couple of days, watch what you do carefully. Be as mature as possible in taking the actions related to the Virgo and the Pisces part of the chart, because there's every indication that you're going to feel the need to take some action in the Virgo part of your chart. Great, do it. It may well be necessary. Soon Mercury is going to come in and oppose Saturn. So as planets move into Virgo, they're going to, oppose Saturn, oppose Neptune. Mercury is going to go retrograde in Virgo. So be careful of this Mars-Saturn transit. Action is needed, mature action. What are your values? What do you value? How are you going to act in a disciplined way? How are you going to align your relationships and resources so that you can move forward in a desired direction and pursue the right goals in the Cancer part of your chart? Support dealing with some sort of Neptunian deceptive activity in the Pisces part of your chart. Stand up for yourself in the Virgo part of your chart, but in a very measured and meticulous and careful manner, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And avail of the opportunities that Venus trine North Node is going to try and bring you. Something from the past may come back around, actually. And let that, if that provides a kind of a fulcrum for everything to start shifting on, let it do it. Everything is not manifesting right now. We have 2 retrogrades coming up. Action is needed, but it's not going to be till the middle of September and into October, with an eye towards February, that we're really going to see things come together. But the time to sit around and despair or be confused is over. It is time for action. What are your values? Where does Cancer sit in your chart? What do you need to achieve there? Move forward. Thank you. Like, subscribe, share, click the bell icon and the squiggly bell on top. You'll be notified when I do new videos. Thanks for your support, and I will see you soon.